Si te gusta el video, no olvides suscribirte y darle like.
Patagonia, a vast, harsh mineral land on the southernmost tip of South America where man always seems smaller than elsewhere. The Highway 40, La Ruta 40, is a mythical route that follows the Cordillera of the Andes in the Argentine part of Patagonia. This is where our first meeting will take place with Lorenzo, who will take us to discover the fascinating life of one of the largest birds in the world, the condor. Then, after air, there's water. Jorge will take us to some of the region's most beautiful rivers. This man has elevated fly fishing to a philosophical discipline. He catches trout just for the pleasure of seeing them swim away free. Patagonia is also gaucho country. Manuel works for a ranch, and all year round he tends the livestock. Manuel has chosen to live in these wide open spaces, far from everything.
I love this vast open country. In town you can't see anything. I'm from here, and I know that the Pampas is where I belong.
Patagonia is a kind of challenge thrown out by nature. Her way of showing us just what she is capable of conjuring up in order to impress us. Here we have the breathtaking alchemy of grandiose landscapes. Patagonia. The mere name rings out like a call to far-off lands. This vast territory was for a long time on the sidelines of the major waves of immigration. Then, when the young nation of America put limits on the influx towards the New World, the more intrepid immigrants headed south to try their luck in this land so full of emptiness. Many families came over from Europe attracted by this virgin land of opportunity, this new Far West. What were those pioneers searching for? A new life? Fortune, perhaps? Or maybe a new identity? Many outlaws on the run from the United States found refuge in these forgotten lands. Patagonia, end of the line of the New World. This is where Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid and their sister-in-flight, Etha Place, lived for several years safe from the bounty hunters. In Cholila, the only thing left is Butch Cassidy's abandoned house. In 1901, he bought 1,500 acres of land with the loot from one of his robberies and built the house. That's still standing. The gaucho of Argentina is a largely solitary figure. He is the ultimate voyager, spends his life in the saddle, breaking horses, herding cattle, gelding the sheep. This is where Butch Cassidy and the Sundance Kid came and mingled in with these men in black berets, their faithful dogs. But when the bounty hunters got wind of their whereabouts, the famous gangsters had to take off once again. And that's when we lost sight of them for good. Now, a century later, the Patagonian wind has swept away the memories of those gringos. But Patagonia still retains its special attraction. Even today, those who choose to settle here are seeking a new life, new horizons, a much sought-after solitude, and a determination to battle it out with the elements. It's November in Bariloche, spring in the southern hemisphere. The cold, violent wind, the famous pampero, never lets up. The wind is the background music of Patagonia, the original inhabitant of this land. For Lorenzo, moving here to this harsh but very authentic land breathed new life into his existence. Here he enjoys true freedom.
The search for freedom is always relative to your past experience. I went to boarding school. When I was young, I was always indoors. Then there was that tragic period in Argentina when we had no freedom because of the military dictatorship. Those were dark times. When we were able to come back to the country, we looked for a place where we could feel free. So yes, Patagonia and the condors that fly here symbolize that freedom.
Lorenzo saw his friends disappear without a trace. He endured suffering in the prisons of the military dictatorship and in exile in Peru. Now he has made a new life for himself here in this limitless expanse where man need obey only the laws of nature.
Look, you can see him over there. Two took off after him, and one's landed.
I can't tell if the one that just landed is an adult. You see that one on the edge? I think that's the adult. It's starting to snow a little bit up there. That's why they're not flying.
He must have landed.
Lorenzo Simpson, 62, is a world-reputed ornithologist. He has devoted his life to the study of condors. In order to get a close look at them, Lorenzo and his son Guillermo are taking us to a ringside seat, way up there.
There'll be a lot of wind up there when we get up on the crest.
It's rather unusual to spend one's life scrambling up and down mountains to observe birds. Lorenzo had done veterinary studies, and then, as he would be taking care of livestock, his eyes would be drawn to the condors soaring overhead, and gradually he became a condor specialist.
The fascinating thing about condors, with respect to other birds, and even to eagles, is that condors know no barriers. Other species have limits imposed by the climate or by their predators. But the condor knows that there's nothing that will stop him from flying. Neither wind nor snow. Nothing stops him. He does what he wants. He's free.
There are certain countries where man comes face to face with the great forces of nature. Patagonia is one of them. Everything is harsh in this land, yet men live here as if they were catapulted to the extremity of the seasons, to the very tip of this cloud-filled sky that knows no end.
I can climb up the face, and then there's the spot I can set an anchor to. Then I can anchor to the two cypresses that are there below. For the descent, I think I'll check that out when we get there.
There's a cave over there where you see that little patch of snow, and there's a nest inside. From here you can't see if it's occupied or not.
He keeps an anxious eye on his son and keeps glancing at the threatening sky above. Observing condors can sometimes get them into tricky situations. Guillermo may be a good climber, but his dad still can't help worrying about him. Guillermo comes upon an empty nest on a difficult cliff face. The condor couple left it for another shelter. Still, Guillermo does manage to bring back a few feathers and leftover scraps of food. Traces that Lorenzo will carefully analyze. His passion for these birds seems boundless. The condor, the animal that symbolizes the Andes, is one of the largest birds in the world. With a wingspan of over 3 meters and weighing up to 14 kilos, he is lord of the air, and this stunning landscape is his realm. In these regions, the quickly changing weather rules, and nature seems to make a plaything of man. The clouds mask the sun, or open up to release a heavy flurry of snowflakes. This year, the southern spring is later than usual, but that doesn't stop Lorenzo and Guillermo from pursuing their quest for the majestic bird.
On this cliff face alone, there are 20 to 30 condors that come to sleep here at night. This is a gathering place, a place to exchange information. Information about where to find food, about what's going on in the group. They share all that here. It's a meeting place. The nests are elsewhere, further on, 1 to 20 kilometers from here. This is a large group made up of couples, and condor couples are faithful for life. They reach sexual maturity around the age of 8, and they can live up to 60 or 70 years here. They're very long-lived animals.
These moments we spend with Lorenzo in the mountains are a real lesson in life on many levels. By dint of observing the condors, Lorenzo's vision has become as sharp as that of these famous birds. He knows all about the wildlife here. He is a vast store of knowledge, chock full of wonders to be shared.
They have no vocal cords. They can't speak. Condors don't sing. They make hissing sounds. All information is transmitted corporally, and vision is the receptor. And that's how they learn to fly, how to land. It's all body language.
My child, my sister, think of the rapture of living together there, of loving at will, of loving till death, in the land that is like you, the misty summits.
The condor is basically a glider. He doesn't flap his wings, he soars. And to be able to cover more than 100 kilometers in their search of food, they need rising currents. Whether they are winds sweeping up the face of a mountain or thermal currents. Today there are no thermals, but there's a strong wind. the wind striking the mountainside, causing the air to sweep up in altitude. And that's what keeps them aloft. That's what we're seeing right now. Their wing is a very complex mechanism, and the feathers on the end are like the flaps of an airplane wing. And in particular, there's a little feather at the very tip that regulates the airflow and acts as a steering mechanism. It's simply fascinating to study condors because there is so much that we humans could learn from them. The condor is an extremely social animal. He lives in harmony with his group and in harmony with nature. Yes, I think that we have a lot to learn from them.
By working for the preservation of the condor, Lorenzo is not only helping to protect a highly emblematic species, he's also acting to save all that is specific to Patagonia and the people that live there. Without the vast estancias, without the gauchos who work them, without the cattle that graze on these endless expanses, Patagonia would still be a land without life. And even the condors would have a hard time surviving here. All along the Cordillera of the Andes, between the mountains and the Pampas, the Ruta 40 runs over 5,000 kilometers, from the Bolivian border in the north down to the Tierra del Fuego in the south, covering a land so vast that even the emptiness feels lost. Driving down the Ruta 40 is an adventure in itself, but it's also a sure way of making unexpected encounters. Here at the foot of the mountains, the condors are not the only ones who enjoy playing with the winds. Jean-Marie Clément has been a glider pilot for 51 years. He holds a number of world records for distance, and every year this Frenchman spends several months in Patagonia.
The Patagonian wind forms waves just like the swell on the sea. And we can surf on it, like on waves. And we can go from wave to wave. And that way we can cover thousands of kilometers in one day. You take off at 5 in the morning and land at nightfall. You can do 3,000 kilometers like that, just like the condor. A condor can cover between 100 and 300 kilometers a day just for his own pleasure, always surfing on the waves. We come here for the wind and the freedom, breathtaking landscapes and total freedom. As the airspace here is not yet regulated, we're pretty much on our own, so we can still fly at 9,000 meters in a glider, along with the commercial planes. With the same instruments, the radar, the transponders, all that, we're still accepted. And given the extraordinary conditions here in Patagonia, which are at present the best in the world, it's quite simply magnificent.
A little further south along the Ruta 40 that runs along the base of the mountain range, countless rios irrigate the lands below. These rivers, untouched by the slightest pollution, draw the connoisseurs, the fly fishing enthusiasts who know all the hiding places of the wild trout. Fly fishing is considered the noblest form of fishing.
This
is the Rio Rivadavia, which runs through the Los Alerces National Park. It's one of the best rivers in all of Patagonia. The water is crystal clear, and the vegetation quite varied, diverse. It's really a lovely balance. This natural beauty is unique, really unique.
Única, realmente única.
Jorge is one of Argentina's top fishing guides. He has elevated fly fishing to an art form and a way of communing with nature. To his way of thinking, fishing is above all a philosophy. It's about sharing with the fishermen that accompany him, like his friend Julio here today. Both men are attracted to these out-of-the-way rivers. Each one is using a different fly to tempt the wild fish. The most surprising thing is that they spend hours trying to catch the fish, and as soon as they do, they let it go.
The pleasure is in the fishing, in catching them, the fight, hooking them, having them on your line, then the pleasure of releasing them. It's true. Today, this is the regulation for almost all the rivers in Argentina. And since we've been practicing catch and release, fishing has gotten very good in this river. And it's getting better all the time. The people's mindset is changing.
Tomala. ¿Qué estabas mirando a ver si había alguna trucha, huevón?
Una ninfa de Mayfly.
Este sombrero.
See this hat? I lost it in the Rio Chubut 5 years ago. Later, Patricio found it. It was 60 kilometers downstream. Here, take it.
Patricio, Jorge's brother, joins them. Life seems quite simple with them, sitting around the table on the bank of a river, telling the hat story.
Un sombrero.
Qué buena la del sombrero, boludo.
Es lo que nos gusta.
This is the life, right?
Es lindo.
It's great.
Amigos,
We're here among friends.
buena pesca,
We have a great fishing spot.
un hermoso lugar
What more could you ask for?
y es muy bueno.
The river changes through the seasons. In early spring, the snows begin to melt. The river is high, and the trout are ravenous. They take up the fight with Patricio, but he lets them go and they live to fight another day.
Es un sport que está
This sport has a direct connection with the inner life of the fisherman. During the winter, he thinks about it all the time. He'll even dream about his flies, He prepares his rods. He greases his reels. Everything has to be ready when the season opens. He writes, he studies up, and reads about fishing.
Andate arriba de mí. Bueno. Se fue.
Got away.
Y se fue.
I lost him. It was this big.
Así, ¿eh? Así,
This big.
Así, así, ¿eh? Sí.
In this land, the skies are bigger than elsewhere, and the clouds, sculpted by the wind, announce a change in the weather. But that doesn't bother anyone because the weather is always changing here. Like others, Jorge came to Patagonia to fulfill himself in a wild, boundless expanse. He wasn't running away from anything. He simply wanted to live out his passion in a breathtaking landscape, far, far from the city. A life in harmony with the seasons. At this southernmost extreme where the land ends, the maps would have liked to have left a blank. Terra incognita. This is exactly what Jorge likes. The wind, the rain, this snow, the rhythm of the elements that repeats itself through the seasons that last one day. Jorge loves these spots that he describes as magnifico. Here he's in a totally unspoiled setting, a sort of secret garden reserved for the happy few. Jorge is accompanied by a young guide that he is training, and he gives him some final tips. To move as little as possible, to try to stay in the shade, and above all, not to disturb anything. The trout are there waiting.
This
stream flows from an underground source. We call it a spring creek. This stream is very cold, between 3 and 4 degrees Celsius lower than the river it flows into a little farther on.
¿La ves afuera del agua? Ahí está de vuelta. Estoy. Yo voy con el hilo. Yo voy con el hilo. Fíjatela. Ok, bien. Sacamos bien, ¿eh? Sí. Es una pesca como una cacería.
This type of fishing is like hunting. The fisherman stalks. He sees a fish, and he does everything he can to catch that fish. He doesn't cast his line at random.
Ahí la tengo. ¡Ah! ¡Puta! Se me fue. ¡Ah, era buena! Era buena. La filosofía de la pesca con mosca.
The philosophy of fly fishing is to keep this space in the wildest and most natural state possible. And as the trout is part of the ecosystem, you mustn't kill it.
Over the 42 years that he's been a fishing guide, Jorge has refined his ideas on the deeper meaning of fly fishing. And again, he confides to us that catching the living fish and letting him go free here in the midst of this wilderness is a sacred moment.
Patagonia gives rise to a certain mysticism. It possesses this charm. Life is totally centered on nature. You don't need a lot of material goods to be happy here. Sometimes I'll be home alone and I think, caramba, I'm feeling a bit lonely, very lonely. But I'll just put on some music, have a good glass of wine. Then I'll be looking out the window and I'll wonder, what do people with a lot of possessions do? Yes, you wonder, just what are they doing now? Whereas here we're so rich with everything that we have around us, and we're satisfied with that.
Si te gustó, dale like y suscríbete. Gracias.